thank you, everybody. Today, I don't think it'll be as entertaining as Jim's was last week. I don't have any magic. But hopefully it will be equally as knowledgeable. So you learn a few things maybe that you didn't know before. What we're going to talk about is spin selling. Who has read the book Spin Selling by Neil Rackham? I guess that's good and bad. Okay? The bad is it's a phenomenal book. It's phenomenal sales training. It's something every salesperson should read and adapt. And really, what it's based on, Neil Rackham didn't come up with sales knowledge or sales tools or any gimmicks to be a better salesperson. What he did is he went out and I believe he got a grant to study salespeople and sales calls. So he went out and just spent years going on sales calls with big organizations, small organizations, great salespeople, bad salespeople, took notes, came up with theories, got with his people, and tried to determine what led to success. Why did some salespeople do better than other salespeople in the same organization that were trained the same way? Does that happen here in every organization? We've got some people, I was told yesterday that we've got a guy, he's just better. I go, why is he setting more appointments than you? He's just better. I go, what does that mean he's better? He didn't really know, but he was better. So maybe, and I can even share his name, it's Mike McFerrin, so great job, Mike, if he's in here. Is Mike in here? He's probably out selling, setting appointments, that's right. That's why he said more appointments. So there's a couple schools of thought. And sales really hasn't changed tremendously in 100 years. People have been selling forever. The way we do it is a little bit different. And I think when we get done here, you'll see, based on these kind of concepts and theories and ways to do this, that it's not rocket science, and it doesn't even seem like you're selling. It seems like you're having a conversation. And so the best salespeople in the world are those that you don't feel like are selling you. You feel like they're, as Ryan Newman said yesterday, which was a great analogy, we're like, Ryan, what are you doing when you're talking to our HVAC prospects, mechanical contracting prospects? He goes, I'm trying to get them here. And he pointed to a chair next to him. He's trying to get them on the same side of the table instead of on the other side of the table, where you're selling to somebody. On this side, you're having a conversation with them. You're talking to them. So that's really what we want to do. So kind of going backwards, Sales 101. What were most of you probably taught to do? And this is, I can tell you, this is how I was taught in my original sales training. This is the way most people were taught. You start out and you build rapport when you initially start talking to somebody. All right, so you do the opening of the call. And that's where you're going to find out and do your pleasantries. From there, you're going to investigate the needs. So you're going to try and find out, what does this prospect need for, what is the problems that they have? So I'm going to try and dig into what those needs are. Once I find those out, I'm going to give the benefits of what my product or service does. So I'm going to try and present to those needs, all right? And after that, then I'm going to handle objections. So now I'm going to try and find out, what are all the reasons why you don't want my product or service, right? And then we do the all-important what? Close. We close the business. So we try all the closing techniques, the assumptive close and the alternative close. Would you rather, this one or this one? Do you want it delivered on Tuesday or Friday? All these different closing techniques. So that was kind of the traditional sales call, and that still works on smaller sales. Okay? So what they came up with in the book is that they really broke it down into large sales and small sales. So how do you classify a large sale and a small sale? A large sale is something that typically takes multiple calls to close, multiple meetings, and it's a higher ticket priced item. It's not something you're going to buy right away. So a small sale, you can typically close it in one call, so it's one call closed, and it's not of significant value. You can make that decision by yourself. You don't have to go back to a committee and find out, get with the executive team and decide, are we going to implement this VoIP system? It's, hey, Lee can go out and buy a computer for our company. He doesn't have to check with Scott or with Chris and say, hey, can I go buy a new computer? Because he's just replaced one we already have. He has the ability to do that. And that could be sold in a one-call close. If he's putting a new server in that's going to cost $10,000, or he's looking at virtualizing our servers, or going into the cloud for disaster recovery, he's probably going to involve Chris in that, and maybe Scott. It's going to be a much larger sale. So it's going to take more than one call for somebody to come in and do that. So what are some factors that determine the strategy that we use based on what kind of call it is? A lot is the length of the selling cycle. So as we kind of continue into that, how long does that sales cycle last? We were just talking about that prior to this meeting. We're trying to come up with how long a sales cycle is in some of the industries we sell into. And Mike's sales cycle was very quick. He just determined on 2 sales, it was 2 weeks. Pretty, just got it. So pretty quick sales cycle. In general, what is our accounting sales cycle that we found? 83 days. So that's a pretty long sales cycle. I used to own a document imaging business. My sales cycle was anywhere from 9 to 24 months, or it could even be longer. People that sell jets, planes for Boeing, they could have a 3-year sales cycle. So sales cycle can take very long. I know, Jim, in your business, you guys probably have some really long sales cycles and stuff you've sold. So I know we've got a gentleman, or I thought we had somebody here that sold for Best Buy. Sales cycle is pretty quick. Somebody comes in, show them a TV. They need a TV, you ask them what they're looking for, you want high def, blah, 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 blah. You ask them questions, kind of run them through that whole process, and then say, hey, we can have this delivered to you, or you can take it with you. Do you have a truck that we can put in the trunk right now? And they go, oh yeah, I got a trunk. Great. Here, I'll get one out of the back and we'll wheel it up and I just close the deal and you're done, right? Another thing is the size of the customer's commitment. So what are you committing to? In our industry here, I consider this a large sale. We have a longer sales cycle and we have a pretty large commitment. So in our first year, you're committing to $45,000, you're committing to $42,000 after that. So is that something that typically somebody's going to buy right out of the gate? They're just going to get on one call and go, yep, I love it, let's do it. Or is it something that you're making a smaller commitment to and you're okay if you make a mistake, right? Because lots of times that's what it boils down to. What if I make a mistake on this decision? And I know my sales reps can attest to that. That people are afraid of making a mistake. And we've heard that before. What if it doesn't work like you say it's going to work? Has anybody ever heard that? What if you can't get the appointments that you're telling me you can? So how do we deal with that? That's tough questions, right? So the other is, again, that risk of the mistakes. And the risk is not only necessarily the money. What else is at risk if you make a mistake? What could be at risk? Time, a lot of time, right?
Your job.
There you go, your job. So one of the old sayings, and Lee may or may not remember this, he's a little bit younger, and Chris may or may not remember this. They said you never get fired for buying blue. You remember that, Chris? Never get fired for buying blue. What that meant was you never get fired if you go with IBM. So that was a saying 20, 30 years ago, Jim. We're dating ourselves. But back then, that was the thing. And so a lot of people would choose that platform because they knew they wouldn't get fired. It costs a little bit more, but the risk of going with something else was significantly higher. And so they said, you know what? I'm not going to risk my job to try something that may backfire on me. So that's a big determining factor when it goes into it. It's not just, hey, I'm going to spend a lot of money. So an example could be, I'm going to go out and buy, my mother-in-law is perfect at this, every workout gadget that comes on an infomercial. Boom, she's on the phone and she's bought it. And she wonders why she's still overweight. Why can't I get in shape, John? I go, because just buying that thing doesn't do it. You actually have to use it. But she doesn't care because she spends 50 bucks here, 80 bucks there. I bet over the course of time she spent thousands of dollars. So if at one time they would have went to her and said, hey, Kathy, we're going to sell you all this workout gear, it's $10,000, she wouldn't have made that same decision. But at 50 or 100 bucks at a pop, it was easy to make. So one of the things we got to do, though, is we got to ask questions. So depending on, it doesn't matter what kind of sale it is. If it's a large sale, if it's a small sale, you still got to ask questions about the sale. So there's really two kinds of questions. And I can tell you, most of you will, I want to see the answers. I won't tell you what I'm going to say. There's open questions and closed questions. Which are the best kind of questions to use in a sale? Open, right? Everybody says open. Why open questions? It's people talking. So do you realize that through thousands of sales calls, there's no linkage in large sales between open and closed questions and success? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you use open or closed. In fact, you have to use some closed-ended questions, right? What would be a closed-ended question that you would have to use sometimes?
Sign the contract?
Yeah, you're going to sign a contract. Yes, no. How many employees do you have? 52. I mean, some simple questions. Now, why do we not want to ask a lot of closed-ended questions, though? What's that? Yeah, one, we can get the answers to a lot of them. So they got this wonderful thing now called the internet and websites, and companies love to do a section that says about us. So before I get on a pitch, I always go to the customer's website and I go to the About Us and I read through it, and it says we've got 22 locations. We've been in business since 1979. We got 32 commercial techs. We do all these services. So why do I need to get on a call with somebody who already knows the answers and ask them the questions?
Makes them feel comfortable.
What's that?
It makes them feel comfortable. You're like talking, you're associating with the person.
Well, no, I say I don't need to do that. I don't need to ask them the questions that they know the answer to and I should know the answer to, because it's out there and it's available. Let's spend that time, that very valuable, precious, small amount of time that we have on the phone with them, asking extremely important questions, finding out what their problems are, what their pain points are, why they would need our product and service. Let's not ask them, so, how long you guys been in business? Tell me about your company. Well, how about you read the About Us on my website? And then we'll both know, okay? So those are things that we can do and prepare ahead of time. But then there's going to be things that we need to know that we didn't find out. Now, our clients, do they need to go in and ask how many workstations do you have for an MSP? No, because they listened to the call recording where we identified how many workstations. They need to ask how many servers? No. It says on there, got 3 servers. What they may do is, could you tell me about how you went about choosing the servers that you did? Now that's a better question, right? Is that open or closed? Closed. Or, open question, right? What's another open-ended question? It would be good in a sales call.
What do you like about your current IT company?
What do you like about your current IT company? Exactly. What do they do well? Anybody else? Is that Jan?
What you don't like about your company?
Yeah, what do you don't like? Now, that you'll tend to maybe not get a real answer on that. Now, I'll give you an example. Because what do we love to do? And Colin just said it today in a pitch I was on with him. What should we do? Tell stories. So I like to tell stories. So I owned a document imaging business, and I had sold to a company here in town for about 8 years. I left, went and did something else. I came back, and I was a principal in an imaging business that we owned. I went back to that client who I knew very well. I was their account manager for years. And I said, what do you guys, is the current vendor doing anything wrong? Is there anything you don't like about them? No, they're doing great. They're doing good. Nothing wrong at all. We wound up winning the business. Went to lunch with a lady, dear friend of mine, been friends for 25 years. She goes, John, she goes, the truth is, they were driving through a neighborhood on their way back after they picked up all our accounts payable documents. They didn't secure the back door of the van. They blew out in an entire neighborhood. We were getting calls from people all in the neighborhood about, hey, your accounts payable documents are all over our lawns. You know what she told me? There's nothing wrong with our vendor. It's great. They don't want to tell their dirty laundry always, so maybe there's different ways to go about finding out those issues. Because they don't want to tell you, hey, buyers are smart too, and they're going to hold their cards tight. Because if you just sit there and they just tell you everything's wrong, then you might as well pull out a contract and get it signed. So, yes, you need to ask open-ended, but you also need to ask some closed-ended questions too throughout the stuff. So it's not a do or die if you ask closed-ended questions. Don't feel like you can't ask those. So what we really want to identify in the sales call, and this also is so I know 3/4 of the room here are people who set appointments, and the other 1/4 or less are people who actually go on those appointments here. But our clients that are watching this are typically going out on sales calls that we've set for them. So these kind of work both ways. If you're on the call setting the appointment, you also need to find out what their needs are. We want to find out what the needs are of the client. Because if they don't have any needs, then why in the world would they buy our product or service? So there's two kinds of needs. Does anybody know the two needs? Don't cheat. Don't cheat. I forgot you got the answers right in front of you. We have two needs. What are they? Implied and explicit. So, all right. So I'm going to give you another story about needs. When I first started working here, I was driving a Cadillac Escalade, an older Escalade. And I was driving from O'Fallon, which is 38 miles away. So I'm like, man, this gas is killing me. So I go in, I tell my wife I'm going to start looking for a new car. Of course, she's like, why do you need a new car? Well, the gas is killing me. So I go to the dealership and talking about, I need to look at a new car. Well, why are you looking for a new car? Well, I'm just not sure about the gas mileage. It's a lot of gas, it costs me a lot to go downtown. So they start talking about cars that get better gas mileage, all right? Never got any deeper than that. Like, is there anything else? Yeah, and I think a lot of you heard this story before. I want a little thing that I can press and put my sunglasses in it. So that was the other thing that I wanted. Always wanted that in a car. And he goes, well, you know what? We got these Honda Accords, and they get good gas mileage, like 32 miles to the gallon. All right, that's good. And they got the little thing to put your sunglasses in. And they had Bluetooth for my phone, which was an added bonus. So I'm like, cool. And I left. Didn't buy the car. So why didn't I buy the car? Why didn't I buy the car at that point? Huh? That wasn't a big enough need. Gas? Well, guess what? When I started here, gas went down below $2. So now I'm going, shoot, man, maybe I don't need gas. The gas mileage as bad as I thought I did. The sunglass holder is cool, and that almost got me to buy, all right? But not quite enough. And I did like the Bluetooth, but I could rig it through my phone, through my car the way I had it. So I was okay. So what's another way that they could have done that. They could have dug a little bit deeper.
Ask more questions.
Ask more questions. So what are some questions they could have asked me? What could have got me to buy that car right then, or made it a lot more urgent for me to buy?
When is your next major service due?
When's my next major service due? Why? Because it's extremely expensive on that. Even more important, digging even deeper. What else?
How many miles?
How many miles are on your car?
Yeah.
Why?
Because that's the use of the car. It's time to trade it in if you don't have mileage.
But why?
Residual value.
Yeah, it wasn't worth anything. Wasn't going to get worth any less. Let's put it that way. It had depreciated about as much as it was going to depreciate. Still looked pretty cool, so I had that going for me. But here's one. How many times has it broken down on you? How many times have you had it in the shop in the last year? So, how many repair bills? But why is that important?
Because those have already happened. You can't forecast what could happen. You already know what did happen.
All right, so let's say you've had these issues. Your car isn't getting any newer. So does it make sense that you're probably going to continue to have more problems? And why does that matter?
Come out of your pocket.
Come out of my pocket. That's okay. I got a job.
Convenience.
I'm working at Abstrakt. I got enough money to pay for those repairs. Huh?
Free if it's under warranty.
Free if it's under warranty. What's a bigger reason?
Time, right?
Huh?
Time.
Kind of.
Convenience.
Two people know the answer because I told them earlier today.
That's why I'm not saying it.
Yeah. Here's a bigger reason. So John, what would happen if your car broke down on the way to work? Would you have to take off? Would you have to miss work? It's a new job. So how many times are they going to let you call in and say that your car broke down before they get rid of you? So they could take it down a path that says, if I don't get this new car, I could lose my job. Now, that's important. All right? So if they dig down to where I don't have money to pay for the repairs, I don't have money to pay for the gas. Of course, I won't be driving 35 miles or 38 miles a day either because I won't have a job to go to. So you can take it down to that level to where that need becomes a very explicit need. I need a new car because I can't have car trouble. Guess why I bought the Honda Accord? Not because that guy was smart enough to do that, because I figured that out on my own. I said, man, I can't afford it. I'm not going to start a new job. I told my wife this. This is what justified to her. I said, I'm not going to start a new job that I'm going to have to call in and call Scott and say, hey, I'm broken down. I can't make it to work today. I got to get my car fixed. I don't want to hear that excuse from my sales guys and gal. And he didn't want to hear it from me. So how do I fix that problem? I go get a new car. Knock on wood, it hasn't broken down in almost a year. Okay? It gets good gas mileage. I love the sunglass holder, use it every day. It's awesome. Love the Bluetooth. Listen to all these guys' pitches on the way home and the way to work. Awesome. But the biggest reason is I'm not worried about having to call in and say I can't make it to work today, because you only get so many of those. Okay? And that's the reality. So how can we make those needs that big that causes somebody to make a choice? So that gets to the value equation that's on there. The value equation, the problem is perceived. So what is perceived value? What is perceived value? Who knows what perceived value is? What about a Rolex? Does a Rolex keep any better time than a Timex? I've had a lot of Timexes, and they kept perfect time. Okay? I got a Seiko, love it to death. Didn't cost nearly as much as a Rolex. I've had this thing for 18 years now. 18 years. I've had to replace the battery twice. Perfect time. Perfect time is like $400. What's the perceived value of a Rolex? Huh? Why would somebody spend $15,000 for a watch that keeps just as good a time as a $20 Timex? Prestige, status.
There you go.
All these things. Hey, I got a Rolex. You don't, okay? And I'm willing to pay 15 grand to show you that I've made it and you haven't. So that's perceived value. That's what they're selling when they sell that. You know, Mercedes versus the Honda Accord. They both get you to work. In fact, that Mercedes gets you there, it costs a lot more. But why? Because the perceived value of that. So people buy cars for perceived value. Some buy them because they want a really fast car, you know, but most people buy them for perceived value because they all get A to B. So those are reasons. The bigger the perceived value, the better likelihood of you selling a higher priced item. So what you've got to be able to do is you have to be able to get the price of the item or the service that you're selling to be less than the perceived value. They got to perceive that this is worth more than what I have to pay. So if I have to pay more and I'm not getting the value, am I going to do it? Would you? Would you spend 50 grand for a Honda Accord? No, but you'll spend 50 grand for a Mercedes. So why is that? The perceived value is higher. It's more reliable, more prestige, all these different reasons to do that. So when you're talking about your products and services, you've got to build the value up in them to a higher level than what the cost is. And that's what we do. That's what we do. Because the value of what we do is worth more than the price that the people pay for it. And like I said, it's pretty expensive. But what they're getting out of it in return is worth way more than the cost they're paying. If they don't believe that, then they don't buy from us. If they believe that, it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, there's some other factors that go in, but if they have a high enough perceived value that, hey, doing this is going to equal bigger results, it's a no-brainer. So that leads us to the topic of spin selling. So for large items, Neil Rackham came up with this study, theory, don't know what you want to call it, solution to selling larger items based on all these calls that they studied along the way. So the S, it's just an acronym. SPIN is an acronym. And anybody in here remember Sun Microsystems? Okay, Sun Microsystems taught this. They were an enormous company back in the 80s and 90s. And they taught spin selling. Cisco taught spin selling. A lot of organizations taught spin selling because flat out it just works. And it just makes sense. So we have different questions that we're going to ask that lead to hopefully a sale and building up that perceived value. So we have situation questions. What are situation questions? What are some situation questions?
How many computers do you have?
Huh?
How many workstations?
How many workstations do you have? This kind of gets back to those, you know, could be open, closed questions, but how many workstations do you have? What are some other situation questions?
Do you handle that in-house or do you outsource?
Handle it outsource. Good questions. How many techs do you have? How many trucks do you guys have on the street? Okay? The problem with overusing those is, quite honestly, you bore them and they get tired of that because every salesperson asks them those questions. But to a degree, like we said earlier, you've got to ask them because there's some you just have to have the answer to. If you don't know how many servers they have, you've got to find out. You got to ask that question. You got to ask that situation question. So you got the ones that are about me. How long have you been doing this for? What got you into this? What made you want to be the purchasing director? You know, so you can ask situation questions about the person. You can ask them about the company. Those things, how many workstations do you have? How many salespeople do you have? Those are questions about the company. And then you have questions about how we operate. So we have things, you know, how many salespeople? How do you guys go about prospecting for new business? So we're going to ask those questions. I mean, that's a great question, right? How do you guys go about prospecting for new business? We want to ask that. We can't bypass that question, can we? Or we never know the answer to it. Next is problem questions. So what are they having problems with? And we want to really dig into what they're dissatisfied with, and this is where we're starting to get into kind of the meat and potatoes. The problem is just asking problem questions doesn't lead necessarily to a successful sale. We just have identified they have some problems, but we haven't identified what the bigger root of that is and why that justifies spending the money for our solution. Okay, so we still have to ask those. So some things, are you satisfied with the amount of prospecting your current salespeople do? No? Yes? Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about that. How many calls are they making a day? How many doors are they knocking on? So you start asking these problem questions that they've got. Is it difficult so if you get into that and you find out, say, well, what kind of impact does that have, or what is the problem if they're prospecting but they're not out selling? Could that affect reaching your sales goals? Yeah, I didn't really think about that. Yeah, I guess it could. Okay. So we're digging into some of those problem questions, finding out what their problems are. Implication questions. This is really the meat and potatoes of spin selling. And this is where you have situation questions. Most new salespeople overload their prospects with situation questions because they're easy, right? They're easy questions. All right, I said I would do this. We're all going to jump up real quick, shake around a little bit, because I did realize from Steve's presentation last time that when you're sitting for an hour in a hot room, I'm going to lose you. Even as loud as my voice is, you're going to fall asleep on me. So we're taking a little intermission, a little break, following what Steve taught us 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, of moving around, getting the blood flowing, standing up a little bit, take some deep breaths. I'm awake, but I'm telling you, when I'm in that seat, it's tough to stay awake. All right, now you can sit down. Everybody feel a little more awake? Yeah. I didn't want to lose you right in front of the most important piece of the presentation, the implication questions. This is where we're digging into what is the implication of not doing what we're offering. Okay? So if I don't buy that new Honda Accord, I could lose my job. Holy cow. That's pretty big deal if I don't do it. Makes it a lot easier to make that decision. These are the questions we've got to do in larger sales. We've got to dig into these questions when we're presenting to companies that are buying on multiple closes. One of the problems with multiple close is that usually the decision is made when you're not on the phone. Okay? What do I mean by that? What's that mean, the decision made when you're not on the phone with them?
Hang up and leave.
What's that?
They thought about it, and I guess with further thinking and applying their own implications, they kind of come to a conclusion on their own time.
So how many people,
They go to a committee.
how many people here, and I think all of our sales reps have migrated to one spot, when they get off a pitch, they come in my office like, that was a great pitch. That was an awesome pitch. They love it. I mean, they've all but signed the contract. Got a follow-up call scheduled with them. In fact, it just happened today, I think. Today it happened. And all of a sudden, I think Aaron came in. Was it Aaron? Came in and he goes, I just got an email that said, you know, we thought about it. We're not going to do it. Cost is too high. We're not going to move forward. Well, that decision wasn't made while he was on the phone with them in that pitch that he was doing. That decision was made between there and his follow-up call that was a week later or whatever it was. The problem is, when you go into these multiple calls, if you haven't given them really enough ammunition, enough training to present your solution, if you haven't given them enough implications of not using what you're selling them, they're going to go into a committee, or they're going to get with their partner, or they're going to get with their executive board, and they're going to go, man, I just had this great pitch. these guys are telling me this great way that we can increase sales with our business, and they go out and they prospect, and they get appointments for us, we're going to close business, and everything's awesome. And then the other people who weren't on that pitch go, how much does it cost? It's X. Too much. And that person doesn't give them all the reasons why it's such a good reason. They're just like, oh shoot, I guess I got outvoted. I got to go back and tell this guy I can't do it, or worse, I'm going to tell him, well, not right now, and I'm going to keep him on the hook for next week and next month and next year, knowing I'm never going to buy. But I'm not going to tell him because I'm a nice guy, I don't want to hurt his feelings, so we'll just keep pushing this thing out. They've done studies, and they say that after a week, the person that you pitched typically forgot about 50% or more of what you talked to them about. So as that time lapses, also the further out it goes after you've pitched, the less likelihood you're going to close that business. Why? Have your parents, or if you are parents, I do this all the time to my kids, because I've got one kid who's the biggest impulse buyer in the world. So every time we go anywhere, Dad, I got to have it. Got to have it. Grabs, I got to have it. I'll pay with my own money. I got to have it. Got to have it. Got to have it. Has anybody ever told their kids, why don't you just wait? Let's wait a couple days and think about it. If you still want it, we'll go back and get it. Anybody ever done that? Has anybody ever had that done to them? And lots of times what happens? They went on and moved on to something else. There's another new shiny toy out there. I try and do it to myself, because I'm an impulse buyer. I'll go see something I love and gotta have it. And I will literally try and make myself wait to see if I really want it as bad as I think I want it today.
That sweet Ashton Kutcher laptop.
What's that?
That sweet Ashton Kutcher.
The Ashton Kutcher laptop, perfect example. I had to have it, went out and bought it. Realized I didn't have to have it that bad. Went through all the trouble, I had to send it back, try and get my money back. It was a mess, but I had to have it. So that's the thing. That was a kind of a one-call close. You know, I saw it once, boom, I went out and bought it, and it didn't turn out to be as great as I thought. So remember that. And the other thing is, too, when we're giving these pitches and we're talking to people, being pushy when you're on the phone. So some salespeople are pushier than others. And there's a balance and a line, fine line that you have to tight wire walk as you're doing this, about pushy enough to find out the questions, find out the answers to the questions you have, and offending the person and really just turning them off. Okay? So the studies show that if it's a one-call close, you can tend to be pushier. Has anybody ever been on on one of those seminars to buy timeshare? Timeshare? I love them. But I haven't bought one yet. But man, I want to. Those are all one-call closes. So are they pushy? I mean, you can't. They have like 5 people that stop you on the way to the car. And you got to keep saying no, 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 no. And then the last effort is, well, we're going to, we'll throw in this and this and this and this and this. Because they know that if they don't close you today, you're not going to buy. You're on vacation usually, you're in a good mood, you already spent a bunch of money, and you're already having a good time because you haven't done a vacation in a while. So you're finally doing it and realizing, man, I need to do this more. Who says that? They're on vacation, like, God, I got to do this more. And then reality comes back in, you go to work, and you realize you can't do it more. Well, they do that, and they get you in those timeshare presentations while you're in a good mood, and they're going to close you. And then when you finally escape, if you escape, what do you think? Oh, I mean, my wife and I go in with a strategy, like you're good cop, bad cop. We know exactly how we're going to do it so that we can escape, and we got time frames, and kids are going to come in at a certain time and start causing all kinds of trouble, so they want to get rid of us. I mean, we plan the thing out because we know how good they are, and we're both salespeople, but we still know how good they are at getting you to close. And they're very pushy. If you do that in our business, it's probably going to lead to a lot of failures. And our clients who don't do one-call closes is probably going to lead to a lot of failures because people don't like that. It works in a lot of instances. I mean, those places are in business and they sell lots of properties because it works. So if you can't use that strategy, or if you do use that strategy and wonder why, if you don't close them on the first call or the next day, you're not closing as much business, you might be a little too pushy. Okay? The other flip side is, if you're not closing business for 6 months or a year on stuff that should close in 60 days, maybe you're not putting enough value into it and finding enough problems that they're actually having to show the value. Because if we do that, I wasn't going to wait 6 more months to get a new car. 6 more months, I might have lost my job. So I couldn't wait 6 more months for that. The value was there in the purchase. Okay? So some more implication questions. I need 2 volunteers. Who wants to volunteer? We're going to go through a scenario. You guys have it in front of you. I was going to say, we're on the board, we can't do it. Okay, Eric is going to be our seller, and who's going to be our buyer?
Let me be the buyer.
And Colin will be the buyer. Do you got the sheet?
No.
We've got a cheat sheet for you. So we're going to go through this with some problem questions, implication questions. Eric, you ready?
Yeah, are we reading off this?
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to go through this scenario so everybody can see it in real life.
Does your inside sales rep have enough time to prospect?
Usually, but we do have them also following up on customer service problems as well.
Interesting. Since they aren't able to prospect all the time, how do you think that's affecting you hitting your goals as a company?
Not a lot, because we also have a salesperson out selling.
Since that salesperson is also prospecting, doesn't that lead to less opportunities to close?
No, it's only a problem when we have turnover with the reps quitting.
So it sounds like you may be experiencing a lot of turnover, am I correct?
Yes, we have over the last couple of years. It seems like every time we get people trained, they either quit or don't produce, and we need to get rid of them.
So what does all the turnover mean to you in terms of additional training costs and reduced revenue?
Well, it usually takes several months to get them up to speed knowing our business and being able to set good appointments. This could cost us several thousands of dollars.
It sounds like you're constantly hiring and training new reps. How many lost opportunities do you think you've experienced in the past year due to this?
Wow, Eric, I've never thought of it that way. I guess quite a few.
So I can see that you have lost a lot of opportunities, but how are these new reps representing your company if they're not fully trained when they get on the phone?
That's another thing we're worried about. It makes us look bad.
So from what you've said, because you've experienced a lot of turnover in the past year, you've increased your recruiting and training costs, reduced the number of sales opportunities, and have your company represented in a negative way.
When you put it that way, I guess we do have a problem with prospecting efforts. Says every prospect ever.
Thank you guys. All right, a little hand for our people. So ask yourself, how many people go in that detail to dig even deeper on prospecting problems that they have? What is that really costing the company? Can you dig that deep and get people to think on a different level? Because that's really what you're trying to do. And you're trying to point out things that are not real obvious, because maybe they haven't even thought to that degree. They know they have these problems, but they're not exactly sure how they're all tied together, how they're related, or how our solution can even fix those, or customer solution can fix those problems. So by digging in, and this is not easy to do. That's a tough conversation to have, to try and just wing it on your own. So what do? What's a good thing to do?
You have to build trust first.
Well, practice. Practice and write down, create a set of implication questions for scenarios that you could come across all the time. Yeah, Eric?
I think if you could let the prospect come to their own conclusion on some of these as well, instead of having this specifically tell them.
Well, that's a great lead into the next slide, which is the need payoff, the N and the spin, is what you want to do, because these implication questions can actually scare the prospect as well. Like, oh man, I got all these problems, holy cow. So what do? And we have to come up with the final way, which is they've got the needs and we've got the payoff, okay? So we call them need payoff questions that we're asking to say, hey, all right, so if I got a a way to solve that prospecting problem, would that be pretty cool to you? Oh yeah, it'd be great. We'd be able to fix that problem where our training issues, and we'd be able to fix this problem and that problem. And now all of a sudden they're telling you how your solution is going to help them solve the problem. So let's get to that real quick. So the need payoff, we got real quick, because this is our last slide. Let's get 2 more volunteers. Who wants to volunteer? We'll do a new need payoff scenario. Mike, you do great. Mike can be the seller. Who wants to be the buyer? All right, there we go. Elliot's the buyer. Yeah, you're the seller.
So would you be interested in a way to increase your number of sales opportunities?
Well, of course.
Is this something that is extremely important to you, the continued success of your company?
Yes, we have remained the same revenue for the past couple of years, and we are afraid that if we lose some of our customers, we could be in trouble.
Is that because there's more competition in your market now?
Yes, we have noticed that there seems to be more and more IT companies selling similar solutions.
So a way to keep your company in front of the prospects in your market would definitely be a huge benefit to you.
Absolutely, we just don't have the manpower to do this. We try to, but
Great, let me show you how we are able to do exactly that. In front of more prospects and greater business.
So there you go. We got them to admit, good job, guys. But that's the kind of stuff you've got to practice this. It's not just going to come natural when you're on a presentation or a pitch with them. And for our customers out there, it's not just going to come natural. You have to think about it, you have to practice, you have to be prepared on what you're going to say and how you're going to dig into that. And that's by knowing, one, what your product and service, what solutions they solve. Okay? Most of us do what we call tell sell. Most people tell sell. They tell about what our products and service do. We tell about the benefits of our products and services. So we tell them all these great things, and we get off the pitch and they're like, wow, you guys are a great company. That's awesome what you do. But we've never really dug in and related what we do to all their underlying problems that they have. They don't really even think they have them. A big problem that we have, and we talk about this, is status quo. So it's the same thing for our IT customers. But the company, for the most part, is already in business. They already have an IT solution, right? So we're trying to get them to think about what that solution is and how do we change that solution. How do we get them to think that, hey, you know what, maybe this isn't the greatest solution. Maybe the solution of our customers is better, right? And that's what we're trying to do for our customers. Our customers are out there trying to do that when they're in front of the clients. But the only way they can do that is to really uncover those needs, use implication questions, and then follow those up with need payoff questions to wind up closing the sale. And closing the sale is not about assumptive close or any of those closing techniques. There's thousands of books written on closing. Closing doesn't even exist. Closing is it just happens. If you do this and you do it right and you show how your product is going to solve these explicit needs that they have, what's going to happen? They didn't close me on my car. I closed myself. I went in there and wrote a check because I needed that car and I needed it now. And that's what we want. Who's a great closer? A person who's great at finding out the implications of not doing what we do or not doing what our clients do. That's a great closer. They don't have to be a great closer, right? Cole never closes. Cole, do you ever close anybody?
Not really.
Not closing anybody. Ryan's not closing anybody. Colin maybe closes people. For the most part, we don't close people because we show them that they have a problem. We show we have a solution for that, and we get them to understand that the value of that is the value of our solution is worth more than the problem they have. So we're going to fix that problem with our solution, and it's going to be cost justified. So thank you guys very much.